All right. Well, thank you for coming today. I think if you are observing this session, you're either going through the experience of infidelity or you know someone else who is. I originally shared my testimony with a Flourish conference in 2022 held in Huntington, West Virginia, and I suppose it must have struck some kind of nerve because they asked me to do this session today. I'll be sharing some of what happened to me about 37 years ago. In some ways, it seems like forever. In other ways, the pain can be nearly as fresh as it was then. In everything that's happened in my life, it's not about how good I was or how I handled what happened, because I was far from perfect and I failed many times. But it's not about me, it's all about Him. Now, let me tell you about my Jesus and how he helped me. My parents married in 1949. My dad was a backslider. My mom had never been saved. They struggled and argued and were ready to split up several times. They had a baby boy in 1950. That was my brother Bill, and my mom miscarried a baby after that. But they prayed and wanted another child. And so they asked the Lord and their Sunday school to pray about this. And so God granted their desire in 1955, and they brought home a bouncing baby girl, me. Now, how cool is this? Not only were my parents saved, all my aunts and uncles on my daddy's side, they were all saved. Yay, Wilcoxes. And in fact, most of our family went to church together. Jesus became my Savior on Easter Sunday in 1966 when I was 10 years old. I played for my first vacation Bible school that year, and most anybody that knew me knew I loved missionaries and I wanted to be one. I was ready to serve Him with my life. So, fast forward to 1973, and you would find a high school graduation at the end of May and then a wedding in August. I loved my man and I wanted to share life with him. But as they say, hindsight's 2020. Now I know that I was not experienced enough in life to realize what I got myself into. Was everything perfect? Well, heavens no, but it was mostly good. My husband was a trustee, a deacon, choir director, and he taught the Bible lesson a lot on Wednesday evenings at the church we attended. My life was busy. I played the piano and the organ. I taught kids in Sunday school and vacation Bible school. And eventually I ended up teaching the younger ladies' Sunday school class, and I was auxiliary president. So if you would ask most people who knew us, my man had to always make the decisions. It was the man's place to rule the home. He had to be in control. He jokingly, at least I thought it was jokingly, told me several times while we were married that his job in our relationship was to keep me barefoot and pregnant. Well, I'm pretty independent, and I decided that was not going to be my life. And so I went out and I applied for a job, and I was hired before I even finished my interview. He didn't like that fact, but he was glad that I could hold down a job, but he really loved the paycheck. As time passed, I saw that there was a major problem, huge problem. He was attracted to women, lots of women. At times, he would tell me that he was attracted to friends of mine, women, my friends, friends at church and at work. He fantasized about having intimate relationships with them at one time or another. And I will tell you up front, I probably didn't handle it very well at the time. I was so crushed that I could barely hold up my head. Time after time, I heard that story again and again with a different name inserted. About the time I'd get over it, it would happen again. He told me it was my responsibility to help him make it through those times of temptation. Then my life drastically changed. It was 1986, and I was almost 31 years old. After 13 years of marriage, I heard the words, "It's better than it's ever been, but I'm just not happy." What a way to end Friday evening dinner. The boxes that he had brought home that evening would later be packed, and he would be gone the next morning. After dinner that night, I headed down the hall and I crawled in the bed. I was just crushed. I was a mess. How could this happen? Well, about 11 o'clock, he came in and laid down in the bed right beside of me and went to sleep. Really? How do you do this? This could not be happening. And it's against all the odds, according to Dr. James Dobson. He ran Focus on the Family for years. He said there are ebbs and flows in marriage, just like the ocean. His research showed that men rarely leave when the kids are small. They either leave before the kids come along or after the kids graduate from high school. Men rarely leave when there are small children at home, but mine did. The next morning, he ate breakfast and then he left with a U-Haul. And it wasn't long until he and his belongings pulled away from our home. I found myself alone without it being my decision or my desire. Maybe you've walked in those same shoes. I don't know. He was definitely an alpha male. He was dominant and always had to be in control. He controlled the finances, so when he left, I didn't even know how much our utility bills were. He left me with $125 and a house payment due the next week that I had to pay. I was only working part-time because I still had two little kids at home. My bring home paycheck was $250 twice a month. Even though it was in the late 80s, that still wasn't a lot of money. I got $90 a week child support. I was left with an old car that broke down constantly. Life was hard. This was worse than anything I'd ever experienced in my entire life. He filed divorce papers against me for irreconcilable differences, but he kept the case dragging on because he wouldn't provide his part of the paperwork. Now, all this time, I suspected he was having an affair, but it took a while to be sure. Yes, it was a gal that he worked with that he complained about a lot. He said, "I wish she had a yard of material sewed along the hem of her dress. It's always so short." I have come to decide that if a woman wants to make a man fall, she can usually do it. My man had found someone else. One Wednesday evening after church, he had been gone for several months. I brought the girls home from church, and they were both in bed, which was very unusual that soon after getting home. And my phone rang, and when I answered it, I found myself talking to a lady who I did not know, but it happened to be his new woman's best friend. Yes, talk about a shock. This new woman had gone to the doctor that day and found out she was carrying his child. And this friend thought I should know about it, hence the phone call. I talked to her for about an hour, and she told me that we could find him at her home anytime after work. And that we did. After I found him, we had 3 deacons that went and confronted him at her home. A month or so later, she miscarried that baby. Well, one day after I had got a temporary job for about 2 months, and after I came home from work one day, my phone rang and I answered it. And it was a local OBGYN office in town. And they said they had received a check from my husband that they couldn't find that I was a patient. And I said, "No, I'm not a patient. He's paying on his mistress's bill." That poor woman who answered I was talking to, she hardly knew what to say. She apologized time after time. But she finally said, well, will you tell me her name so I can get this check posted? I laughed about it, but it was another dagger in my heart. Well, one day, one of my best friends at church, her name was Janet Rose, she found herself suddenly single too. Her husband, however, died of a massive heart attack. He had grieved himself to death over my man that was leaving. His wife, Janet, told me his parents were both killed in a head-on car accident. And she said he never cried. He accepted it as God's will. But when your man left, she said he couldn't handle it. He cried constantly. It broke him. And so he died of a broken heart. Those circumstances were totally different. We were both now single, and every day was a challenge for both of us. She had 3 boys, and I had 2 girls. One day she called me and she said, Jody, we need each other. We have to pray for each other to make it through this new life that we're leading. Pray for me, and I'll pray for you. And we leaned on each other to cope through those trying days until about 3 years ago when she went to heaven. Both of us remained single until, for her, till she died, and me to this present day. I will tell you a little secret. You know, a woman can make it through anything as long as she has another woman who knows what she's going through and understands it. One day, Janet told me, Jody, it has to be easier for me than for you. And I said, how can you say that? Tom's gone. And she said, well, when Tom died, I knew he loved me. And you can't say that same thing. How true. The divorce dragged on for almost, well, it was better than a year because he still wouldn't provide the paperwork. My lawyer had to threaten to sue him with contempt of court to get him to provide the paperwork so the divorce could be final. Personally, I felt abandoned, mistreated, abused, and betrayed. I felt like a failure. Remember something, you can't go on your feelings. I felt like I should give up my ladies' Sunday school class. What kind of example had I become? Our Sunday school superintendent, he refused to accept my resignation. He said, if you quit teaching, will you stay in the Word like you do now? And I told him I knew I wouldn't. And he said, well, then I think things need to stay the same. Also, they wouldn't let me off the piano bench. He knew what he was doing. It kept me tied to a church where my family and I needed to be. Now, a dear friend that I knew from back in the 70s when we were first married, he told me sometime after, a couple of months after our divorce was final, that he knew of 3 gals that attended college with my ex that he had gotten pregnant. One left town, one had her baby, the other one had an abortion. In fact, the girl that became his ex-girlfriend when I met him, she ended up pregnant, and it was his as well. How many more babies are out there that I don't know about? I don't know. Sometimes it's more than my heart could bear. Another overwhelming thought is now I'm responsible for everything. Not only do you have to take care of the household finances, I worked an 8-hour day, and many days it was 11 hours. Then you have to come home, you have to cut the grass, you have to do the repairs around the house, you have to get the groceries and schedule your car maintenance. That was the biggest challenge I'd ever faced. And I was overwhelmed. But you know what? The flesh said, you need to prove to him that you don't need him. You can make it on your own. But you know, I can't. I couldn't. I needed help. So let me tell you about my Jesus. He came alongside me, and he became my spouse, my other partner. God used my friend Bonnie Vance to encourage me through song. She would sing this at our WAC retreats, and she'd sing, as you travel down life's road, He is with you every day. With every step you take, He's walked ahead of you. And every night as you lay down, angels are camping all around. I'll never be alone, for He is in the midst. He's in the midst of our storm. He's in the valley we walk through, where two or three are gathered in His name. He'll be there too. When you feel so all alone, He is standing next to you. He's with us now, our Lord. He's in the midst. How many times I had to claim this. I also knew that I needed to set a good Christian example for my girls. I wanted them to know that God could and He would take care of us even when I couldn't do it on my own. One day I was listening to Chuck Swindoll on the radio, and he spoke from Exodus chapter 3 about Moses as he lived on the backside of the desert, tending his father-in-law's sheep. Now, Exodus 3:1 says, Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. Now, the word there, to the backside of the desert, the word for desert is midbar in Hebrew, and that means actually to speak. So in that context, the desert place was where God spoke to Moses. And in our desert places, that's where God will speak to us. Chuck also said, what's a desert place to you may not be for me, but we all have them. God let me know that this desert place of chaos in my life was where He would prove His love for me, where He would give me peace. The Hebrew word for peace is shalom. Now, shalom does not mean to the absence of chaos, but rather to an overall, deeply entrenched sense of harmony, health, and wholeness in the midst of chaos. Thankfully, instead of blaming God for the problems and running from Him, I ran to Him. What appeared as stumbling blocks became stepping stones. I changed my practices. I prayed more. I studied my Bible more than I had in the past. I read Christian books. I saved probably 3 minutes to buy a $13 book by Chuck Swindoll called The Seasons of Life. And I did a lot of counted cross stitch to pass the time, especially after the girls went to bed at night. One day during my Bible study, the Lord led me to a verse that has become my life's verse. Isaiah 41:10. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. The Lord made me confident that no matter what happened to me, He was in control and that He would be with me and He would help me. I've learned through all these years that I choose my attitude about my circumstances. I've learned not to get stuck in the past. If we only long for the way things were, we're saying that God is not capable of being great now. I've also discovered that the more anger towards the past that I have in my heart, the less capable I am now of loving in the present. A sweet friend once testified, I may have to walk through the valley, but I don't have to set up housekeeping there. I love that. Thank you, Virgie. She's in heaven now for that testimony. I don't want to set up housekeeping in the valley. How that has helped me so many times through the years. I can be a negative Nelly and wallow in my aloneness and my sorrow, or I can fill my time doing constructive things by helping others who are in the same boat as me. 2 Corinthians 1 verses 3 and 4 said, Blessed be God, even the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, who comforteth us in all of our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort them which are in any trouble, by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted of God. In the last 6 or 7 years, I've had about a dozen friends from church suddenly widowed or divorced. My brother suddenly passed away in February of 2018, so now my sister-in-law is widowed. None of these ladies chose this change in their life, but their circumstances gave me an opportunity to help them as they walk through those same steps as I walked a long time ago. My divorce has not been the only chaotic thing that has happened in my life. Absolutely not. The last 4 or 5 years has been a nightmare for both of my daughters. One lost about everything she ever owned. She was hit by an 18-wheeler, run over twice. Her home burned to the ground with most of everything she had in it. A vehicle of theirs burned. Her husband lost his job. She moved into a house that I inherited, and it was flooded, a total loss. My other daughter lives with a man who's violent and is abusive. There are many things that have happened in her life that are better left unsaid. I could write a book, and most people would believe it was fiction because no one family could have that many bad things happen, but it's true. And we have commented that we never want to say what can happen next. We don't want to know. We have learned to trust God for the outcome in every situation. But let me tell you about my Jesus. He has given peace in chaos. I cannot understand why most of this has happened to my family, but I don't have to understand it. Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6 say, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto your own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. As I trusted the Lord for help through those years, my faith in him increased. If you're walking in uncertain roads in life, he'll do amazing things for you too if you let him. Let me tell you this one thing: God never wastes our pain. He is aware of every tear that we shed, and he can heal your heart, and he can dry your tears if you let him. Now, let me tell you how God helped me and upheld me with his powerful right hand. One day I lost my job, as I said. Well, I lost my job one day, and the next day, as I said, I found out his mister's best friend told me that she was pregnant. You talk about a double whammy: lose your job, find out your husband has gotten someone pregnant. The Lord let me stay home for 6 months to take care of my girls and to regain my bearings. Somehow the bills were always paid. I can't explain that. To this day, I don't know how it happened, but they were always paid. Then he gave me a job at a company that I had never applied for. They called me to come and work for them. I had done accounting work, and in 2012, I was a tax compliance analyst, and I'd been in that job for 14 of the 25 years that I worked for this company. They told me that I'd never lose my job. I had to give 7 years notice before I retired. Then one day, we were on a conference call, and I was told, you'll either be offered a position or a severance package. Really? Yeah, it happened. I was out of a job after 25 years at 59 years of age. Nobody wants to hire anybody 59. Did I do like James said to do and count it all joy? Hardly. I had ugly thoughts and attitudes. I was so frustrated and I was quick-tempered. But let me tell you about my Jesus and what he whispered to me. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that all things work together for good, to our benefit, to them that love God, to them that are called according to his purpose. Not only did those things work out for my good, but he made me a better Christian, and he made me better able to help other people. Now, let me tell you about my Jesus. Now he cares for me. One day when he first left, he would come and pick up my girls on Saturday, and he didn't bring my big $90 child support check. I had $0. I'm not kidding. I had no cash, and I had no gas in my car. And I decided, the flesh said, you can't go to church tomorrow. because you don't have enough trips to go to church twice and then to the bank on Monday. I mean, I was on the bottom side of that red mark on the empty side. And I was too proud to ask my parents for help. But I prayed about what to do, and the Lord reminded me that Hebrews 10:25 says, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. So that's as far as I could read when I read that verse. My place was at church at church time. I told the Lord, you told me to go to church. My job is to go. Your job is to make the gas last so I can get there. The next morning, I got them girls up. I got them dressed, put them in the car, and I started it. And I went to look down at the gas gauge, and I thought, no, can't do that. That's not faith. And so I drove all the way to the church and started my normal routine. I put my Bible, my notes, my purse in my Sunday school class. Then I went out to play the piano for the kids' free Sunday school. When we dismissed for Sunday school, I went in there, and when I got ready to open my Bible to teach my lesson, my mouth flew open. There was a $20 bill in my purse. Now I could see my podium where I taught from the piano where I was playing the piano. I never saw anybody open my Bible and put anything in there. How did it get there? I don't know to this day. But you know what? It cost $17 to fill up my tank back then. So not only did I get what I needed, I got $3 extra. That's God. He provided for me as he promised in his word. It happened another time. I didn't tell anybody, but this time the $20 was in my purse, laying on top of my wallet. One time when I was out cutting grass, the sun was going faster than I could walk, and I still had half of my side yard to cut. I prayed and asked God to give me enough light to finish, and you know what? He did. The sun was still up, and I had finished in probably 10 minutes to boot. Let me tell you about my Jesus. One time I thought I had a water leak, and I needed to check the meter. Well, my ex was a water company man, so I knew a lot of useless information, and I knew that a water meter lid weighs 70 pounds. Yeah, so with a crowbar in my hand, an umbrella over my shoulder because it was pouring the rain, and the help of the Lord, I went out there and tried to pop that lid off. First time, no go. And I said, okay, Lord, on the count of 3, you're going to help me. And I counted 1, 2, and 3, and I pulled on that crowbar, and that lid popped off like it didn't weigh an ounce. No leak. And I said, well, the lid has to go back on. And I said, I'm going to count to 3, Lord. You pull when I get to 3, and I'll just help you a little bit. It went back on effortlessly. The scriptures tell us in Isaiah 40:28-31, hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary. There is no searching of his understanding. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increases strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. Now, let me tell you another way, another wonderful instance of God's provision. It's a Janet story, my friend that we prayed for each other. It was winter time and there was snow on the ground. A lady that I'd worked with had given me 2 big brown grocery bags full of potatoes that her parents had grown during the summertime. There were too many potatoes for my little family, so I shared the wealth with my mom, my babysitter, and my friend Janet. Well, that Saturday morning, I went to make my copies of my bulletin, and I stopped at Janet's house to drop off those potatoes, and there was no one home, so I left them on the porch beside her front door. I guess it was about an hour after I made it home, the phone rang, and it was Janet, and she said, did you leave me a bag of potatoes this morning? I said, yes, ma'am, I did. They're from Treva's parents. And she said, let me tell you what happened this morning. She said, I went to the grocery store, and when I went to check out, I didn't have enough money to pay for everything. And I had to put my potatoes back. I told the Lord I really did need those potatoes, and I love potatoes. And she said, I asked him if he would provide them for me. When I got home and I carried my first set of grocery bags to the house, I discovered a brown grocery bag full of potatoes sitting by my front door. God is so very good. He gives us everything we need. Now, during these 36 years, my health has failed. I have asthma and COPD. The medicines I take for that, they cause degenerative bone disease. I'm now 6 inches shorter than I used to be. I have fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis have been added. I didn't realize how devastating COVID was with double pneumonia until I contracted that in January of 2022. That's the reason why I'm on oxygen now. For 2 years, I've never been able to get off of it. Other side effects, I have the earthquake syndrome, that's what we call it, but shakiness. I have anemia, hair loss, COVID fog, memory products, or memory problems, and chronic fatigue. I'm slowing down, but these things have not stopped me. I determined that as long as I can, I'm going to serve him until my last breath. I've always loved to travel, and as a young woman, I wanted to be a missionary. And like Isaiah said, here I am, send me. But even though that wasn't fulfilled, God blessed me to have a missionary experience several times on short-term basis. I've been to Israel with my family and friends 4 times. I spent 10 days taking care of toddlers and HIV kids in Uganda. I cooked for volunteers for 13 years as our church was a collection center for Operation Christmas Child. I was allowed to distribute Operation Christmas Child shoeboxes in 2005 in and around Otavalo and Quito, Ecuador. Several of us attended a WNAC-sponsored Sisters Prayer Fellowship in Almaty, Kazakhstan in 2005 with 600 sisters from the Central Asian countries. What an experience. In 2007 and 2009, we made return trips there to help with Christmas Joy, their version of Operation Christmas Child. Then in 2018, Linda Hutchison and I boarded a plane and landed in Sofia, Bulgaria, and we experienced the joy of sharing our testimonies with the Bulgarian ladies at their retreat. If I never get to go on another mission trip, which is not likely, I can die a happy woman because what Jesus has done in my life. In all these years, I've learned a lot about myself, but I've learned a whole lot more about my Heavenly Father. I've learned my heart is not too broken for my Jesus to fix. There's no hurt too deep that he cannot heal. He will never leave me nor forsake me. He provides for me in ways that I can never imagine. He gives me the desires of my heart. He gives me joy and peace, and he can do the same for you. So if you found yourself in the same chaotic circumstances that I found myself, you don't have to endure your life. You can enjoy your life. Let me tell you about my Jesus. Thank you.